There exists within every human psyche a presence that has been misunderstood for millennia, demonized by religions, pathologized by psychology, and feared by those who sense it stirring in the depths of their being. Jung called it the shadow, but this term has been so corrupted by popular misconceptions that we have forgotten its true nature. Your shadow is not the evil twin lurking in your unconscious, waiting to possess you with demonic impulses. It is not the dark side that must be conquered or the sinister force that must be suppressed. Your shadow is something far more tragic and far more sacred. It is the banished child within your psyche, the collection of all the parts of yourself that you were taught to reject, hide, or deny, now desperately crying out for recognition, integration, and love. The shadow begins forming in the earliest moments of consciousness, when the innocent child that you once were started receiving messages about which parts of yourself were acceptable and which were not. Perhaps you were told that anger was bad, so you banished your capacity for healthy aggression. Perhaps you learned that sadness made others uncomfortable, so you exiled your ability to grieve. Perhaps you discovered that your natural wildness, your authentic sexuality, your genuine needs, or your spontaneous joy were somehow wrong, dangerous, or unwelcome in the world you inhabited. Each time you received these messages, a part of your authentic self was sent into exile, cast into the shadow realm where it has been waiting ever since for someone to recognize its value. Jung understood what modern psychology often misses. The shadow is not composed of evil impulses but of unlived life, unexpressed potential, and disowned vitality. It contains not just what we consider negative about ourselves but often our greatest gifts, our deepest creativity, our most authentic power. The shadow holds the parts of us that were too bright, too intense, too much for the people around us to handle. It contains the leadership qualities we were told were too bossy, the sensitivity we were told was too weak, the intelligence we were told was too threatening, the passion we were told was too overwhelming. This banishment creates what I call the orphaned self parts of your psyche that carry the original wound of rejection and spend their lives trying to get your attention through symptoms, projections, and unconscious behaviors. These orphaned aspects don't want to destroy your life. They want to rejoin it. They don't seek to harm you. They seek to be heard. They are not evil forces plotting your downfall, but abandoned children within your psyche who have been knocking on the door of consciousness for years, hoping someone will finally let them come home. The shadow's desperation to be seen manifests in countless ways that we typically misinterpret as pathology. The person who cannot stop themselves from eating sweets may have a shadow that was never allowed to receive sweetness in life. The individual who struggles with anger management may have a shadow that was forced to swallow rage for so long that it now erupts uncontrollably. The one who cannot commit to relationships may have a shadow that learned early that love meant abandonment of the self. These are not character flaws but shadow communications, desperate attempts by disowned parts of the psyche to get the attention they need. When Jung spoke of making the unconscious conscious, he was not speaking of a cognitive exercise but of a profound reunion with the banished parts of ourselves. He understood that integration of the shadow is not about controlling or conquering these aspects, but about welcoming them home, listening to their stories, understanding their gifts, and finding conscious ways to honor what they have been trying to bring to our lives. The shadow does not want to take over. It wants to contribute. It does not seek to destroy. It seeks to create. It is not evil. It is simply tired of being ignored. The tragedy of shadow rejection is that in banishing these parts of ourselves, we do not eliminate them, we make them autonomous. The disowned aspects become unconscious complexes that operate independently of our conscious will, influencing our behavior, our relationships, and our choices in ways we do not understand. The very attempt to get rid of the shadow gives it more power, while the willingness to see it, understand it, and integrate it transforms it from an unconscious force into a conscious ally. Your shadow has been trying to communicate with you your entire life, but it does not speak in the language of words or rational thoughts. It speaks in the ancient dialect of symptoms, compulsions, projections, and what Jung called meaningful coincidences. Every addiction whispers of a disowned need. Every phobia points to an exiled strength. Every explosive emotion carries a message from a part of yourself that has been silenced for too long. These are not pathologies to be cured, but communications to be decoded. Letters, written in the strange script of the unconscious by parts of yourself that have no other way to get your attention. The shadow's communication system operates through what I call inverse expression. the tendency for disowned qualities to manifest in their opposite form. The person who prides themselves on being perpetually calm may find themselves inexplicably drawn to drama and chaos, not because they are contradictory, but because their banished passion is seeking expression through external circumstances. The individual who has built their identity around being helpful and selfless may experience sudden bursts of inexplicable selfishness or resentment, not because they are becoming evil, but because their disowned self-care is demanding recognition. Consider the perfectionist who cannot understand why they are attracted to messy, disorganized partners. Their shadow contains the spontaneity, the acceptance of imperfection, the ability to live in the moment that they banished in their quest for flawless control. Their attraction is not dysfunction, but their psyche's attempt to reunite them with these lost aspects of themselves. The ordered person seeks chaos not to be destroyed by it, but to be completed by it. Their shadow is not trying to ruin their life. It is trying to balance it. This communication becomes more desperate when it is continually ignored. The shadow that cannot get attention through gentle nudges will escalate to more dramatic forms of expression. The disowned anger that was politely suppressed may eventually explode in rage that seems to come from nowhere. The banished sexuality that was deemed inappropriate may surface in compulsive behaviors that feel alien to the conscious personality. The exiled creativity that was sacrificed for practical concerns may manifest as restlessness, depression, or a persistent sense that life lacks meaning. Jung understood that symptoms are often the shadow's last resort, the final attempt to get the conscious mind to pay attention to what has been ignored. The chronic illness that forces rest upon someone who banished their need for care. The anxiety that prevents action in someone who exiled their capacity for healthy hesitation. The depression that slows down someone who banished their right to grieve. These are not random afflictions, but purposeful communications from parts of the psyche that have been denied expression for too long. The shadow also communicates through projection, the unconscious tendency to see in others what we cannot acknowledge in ourselves. The qualities that most irritate, fascinate, or trigger us in other people are often the exact qualities we have banished from our own conscious awareness. The person who is constantly frustrated by others' selfishness has likely exiled their own healthy self. The individual who is perpetually drawn to confident, outspoken people has probably banished their own authority and voice. Our projections are not random. They are precise maps leading us back to our disowned aspects. Perhaps most mysteriously, the shadow communicates through what Jung called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to carry messages from the unconscious. The person who has banished their creative side may find themselves repeatedly encountering artists, creative opportunities, or creative challenges until they finally pay attention to what their psyche is trying to tell them. The individual who has exiled their need for solitude may find that circumstances repeatedly force them into isolation, until they learn to honor this neglected aspect of themselves. The shadow's desperation to be seen intensifies over time if its communications continue to be misinterpreted as problems to be solved rather than messages to be understood. Each symptom medicated without insight, each projection judged without reflection, each synchronicity dismissed as coincidence represents a missed opportunity for reunion with the disowned self. The shadow does not give up, but its methods become increasingly dramatic until the conscious mind finally recognizes that something within is crying out for acknowledgement. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of shadow work is the discovery that much of what we have banished to the unconscious is not our darkness but our light, not our weaknesses but our strengths, not our pathology but our greatest potential. Jung called this phenomenon the golden shadow, the brilliant aspects of ourselves that we have disowned because they were too threatening, too powerful, or too much for the environments in which we learned to survive. We fear our own magnificence more than our own darkness, and in doing so, we rob ourselves and the world of the very gifts that could transform everything. The golden shadow forms when the authentic expression of our gifts becomes dangerous to our survival or acceptance. The child who was told their creativity was impractical learns to hide their artistic vision. The young person whose intelligence threatened insecure adults learns to dim their brilliance. The individual whose natural leadership made others uncomfortable learns to follow rather than lead. The person whose sensitivity was seen as weakness learns to harden their heart. These gifts do not disappear when we exile them. They retreat into the shadow where they wait, often for decades, for someone to recognize their value and call them home. The golden shadow manifests as an inexplicable attraction to people who embody the qualities we have disowned in ourselves. We find ourselves drawn to confident people because we have banished our own authority. We are fascinated by creative individuals because we have exiled our own artistic nature. We admire those who speak their truth because we have silenced our own voice. We are attracted to passionate people because we have suppressed our own fire. What we seek in others is often what we have refused to claim in ourselves. This projection of our own light creates what I call vicarious living, the tendency to experience our own potential through others rather than claiming it directly. We become fans, supporters, admirers, or even critics of people who are living the very qualities we have banished from our own expression. We live our unlived lives through celebrities, artists, leaders, or rebels while maintaining the safe but soul-crushing identity we constructed to survive our early environment. The golden shadow also appears in our dreams, often as figures of the same gender who embody qualities we admire but cannot recognize in ourselves. The timid person dreams of warriors. The practical person dreams of artists. The rational person dreams of mystics. These dream figures are not random but precise representations of our own disowned potential, appearing in the theater of sleep to remind us of who we could become if we had the courage to reclaim our exiled gifts. But the golden shadow carries its own form of desperation. Unlike the darker aspects of shadow that create obvious symptoms, the golden shadow creates a more subtle but equally devastating form of suffering, the persistent sense that we are living below our potential, that we are playing small, that we are dying while still alive. This manifests as chronic dissatisfaction, restlessness, depression that has no obvious cause, or what Jung called the unlived life, the persistent feeling that our real life is happening somewhere else, to someone else, while we remain trapped in a pale imitation of our true potential. The golden shadow becomes increasingly desperate to be seen as we age and begin to confront our mortality. The midlife crisis is often the golden shadow's final plea for recognition, the last chance for the unlived life to demand expression before it is too late. The successful person who suddenly wants to become an artist, the practical individual who develops an inexplicable urge to travel the world, the responsible parent who dreams of wild adventures, these are not signs of mental instability, but the golden shadow's desperate attempt to prevent a life from ending without ever having truly begun. The cruelest aspect of the golden shadow is that we often recognize our disowned gifts in the moment before death, when it is too late to reclaim them. The deathbed regrets that haunt the dying are rarely about what they did wrong but about what they never allowed themselves to become, the gifts they never claimed, the potential they never actualized, the light they kept hidden until the very end. At the heart of Jung's understanding of the shadow lies one of his most profound insights, the archetype of the wounded healer. The recognition that our deepest wounds often contain our greatest gifts to the world. The shadow is not simply a collection of rejected aspects that need to be reclaimed for personal wholeness. It is often the very source of our capacity to heal, create, lead, and serve others in ways that only someone who has walked through darkness can understand. Your shadow is not just desperate to be seen for your own sake, it is desperate to be seen because the world needs what it carries. This concept challenges everything we have been taught about healing and wholeness. We have been conditioned to believe that we must be fully healed before we can help others, that we must have conquered our darkness before we can offer light, that we must be perfect before we can be of service. But Jung discovered something far more profound. Our wounds, when consciously embraced and integrated, become the very source of our ability to heal others. The addict who has faced their darkness becomes the one who can guide others out of addiction. The person who has battled depression becomes the one who can sit with others in their darkest moments without flinching. The individual who has integrated their rage becomes the one who can help others transform their anger into justice. The wounded healer archetype reveals that shadow work is not self-indulgent navel-gazing but sacred service to the collective. When we refuse to face our shadow, we deprive the world of the unique gifts that can only emerge from our specific constellation of wounds and strengths. The person who has never faced their own darkness cannot truly help others navigate theirs. The individual who has not integrated their own shadow will unconsciously inflict their unprocessed material on those they claim to help. The helper who has not done their own work becomes the helper who harms. This is why the shadow becomes increasingly desperate to be seen as we mature. It is not just crying out for personal integration, but for the opportunity to serve its purpose in the larger tapestry of human experience. Your specific shadow material, the particular ways you were wounded, the specific gifts you were forced to hide. The unique combination of light and dark that makes up your psyche exists not just for your own healing but as medicine for others who carry similar wounds. The shadow contains what I call earned wisdom, insights that can only be gained through direct experience of both falling and rising, of being broken and becoming whole, of losing oneself and finding oneself again. This wisdom cannot be learned from books or acquired through intellectual understanding. It can only be earned through the lived experience of shadow integration. When we deny our shadow, we deny the world access to this earned wisdom. We remain perpetual students rather than becoming teachers, eternal patients rather than healers, forever seeking rather than offering. Jung understood that the collective shadow of humanity, the accumulated wounds, traumas, and disowned aspects of our species, can only be healed through individuals who have the courage to face their personal shadow and transform it into conscious service. Each person who does their shadow work contributes to the healing of the collective unconscious. Each individual who integrates their darkness helps to lighten the darkness of the world. This is not metaphorical but literal. Consciousness is contagious, and the person who has faced their shadow gives others permission to face theirs. The wounded healer also embodies the principle of what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. They have learned to contain both light and dark, strength and vulnerability, wisdom and ignorance, healing and woundedness within themselves without needing to project one side onto others. This capacity to hold paradox, to be simultaneously broken and whole, wounded and healed, becomes a form of service to others who are struggling with their own contradictions. But the wounded healer archetype comes with its own shadow, the temptation to remain identified with the wound rather than growing beyond it, to use one's trauma as an identity rather than as a teacher, to help others as a way of avoiding one's own continued growth. The conscious wounded healer knows that their work is never finished, that shadow integration is a lifelong process, and that their greatest service lies not in being healed but in remaining consciously committed to the ongoing journey of becoming whole. We arrive now at the sacred threshold, where the desperate cries of the shadow finally meet the compassionate response of consciousness, where the banished aspects of the self are welcomed home, not as conquered enemies, but as long-lost family members returning from exile. The integration of the shadow is not a psychological technique but a profound act of self-love, a reunion with the parts of yourself that have been waiting in the darkness for someone to recognize their value, honor their gifts, and invite them back into the light of awareness. This homecoming begins with what Jung called active imagination, the conscious dialogue with the shadow aspects that have been trying to communicate through symptoms, projections, and unconscious behaviors. Instead of fighting these aspects or trying to eliminate them, you begin to speak with them directly, to ask them what they need, what they have been trying to tell you, what gifts they carry that have been ignored. This is not self-indulgence but sacred conversation, the kind of deep listening that heals wounds that may have been bleeding for decades. The process of shadow integration requires what I call compassionate recognition, the ability to see the shadow aspects not as flaws to be corrected but as valuable parts of yourself that were forced into hiding by circumstances beyond your control. The anger you banished may have been your healthy boundaries trying to protect you. The sadness you rejected may have been your capacity for deep feeling. The wildness you suppressed may have been your life force seeking expression. The neediness you scorned may have been your authentic desire for connection. Each shadow aspect, when seen with compassion, reveals itself to be not a weakness, but a strength that was misunderstood. As these banished parts return home, they bring with them the energy, creativity, and vitality that was lost when they were exiled. The person who reclaims their healthy anger discovers they can finally set boundaries. The individual who embraces their vulnerability finds they can create genuine intimacy. The one who integrates their wildness rediscovers their passion for life. The person who accepts their neediness learns to ask for what they want. Shadow integration is not just healing, it is resurrection, the bringing back to life of parts of yourself that were pronounced dead but were actually just sleeping. This homecoming transforms not just your relationship with yourself but your relationship with others. When you stop projecting your disowned aspects onto other people, you can see them clearly for who they actually are, rather than as screens for your unconscious material. When you integrate your shadow, you stop being triggered by the same qualities in others because you have made peace with these qualities in yourself. You become what Jung called a conscious individual, someone who owns their complexity rather than being owned by it. The integrated shadow becomes a source of creativity, authenticity, and power that was previously unavailable to consciousness. The artist who reclaims their rejected sensitivity creates with unprecedented depth. The leader who integrates their vulnerability leads with genuine authority. The healer who embraces their own woundedness serves with profound compassion. The teacher who owns their not knowing teaches with authentic wisdom. Shadow integration is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. Perhaps most importantly, the homecoming of the shadow transforms your relationship with the world's darkness. When you have faced and integrated your own capacity for destruction, selfishness, and harm, you can meet the world's shadow without being overwhelmed by it. You become someone who can hold space for others' darkness without being consumed by it, who can see the light hidden within apparent evil, who can offer healing presence to those still lost in their own shadow projections. The shadow that was once desperate to be seen becomes, through integration, desperate to serve. It transforms from an unconscious force that disrupted your life into a conscious ally that enriches it. The banished child within your psyche becomes the wise elder who guides your choices. The rejected aspects become the accepted wholeness that allows you to live with unprecedented authenticity and power. Your shadow was never evil, it was always sacred. It was never your enemy, it was always your teacher. It was never trying to destroy you, it was always trying to complete you. The moment you recognize this truth, the moment you open your arms to welcome home the parts of yourself you have kept in exile, everything changes. You stop being at war with yourself and start being in love with your wholeness. You stop hiding from your complexity and start celebrating your depth. The shadow's desperate cry to be seen finally receives its answer. I see you. I welcome you. I honor what you carry. Come home. If you recognize your own shadow in these words, if you feel the stirring of long banished parts of yourself calling for recognition, then your integration journey begins with a single act of courage. Stop fighting yourself and start listening to yourself. Stop trying to eliminate your darkness and start having a conversation with it. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to dive deeper into the transformative work of shadow integration. Share this video with someone else who needs to understand that their complexity is not their curse but their greatest gift waiting to be unwrapped. And most importantly, try this today. Identify one quality in yourself that you've always judged, rejected, or tried to hide. Instead of pushing it away, ask it, what are you trying to tell me? What gift are you carrying? What do you need from me? Listen with the same compassion you would offer a child who has been lost and is finally finding their way home. Your shadow isn't evil, it's the part of you that carries your unlived potential, your unexpressed gifts, your unclaimed power. It's not trying to destroy your life, it's trying to complete it. It's not your enemy, it's your teacher disguised as your tormentor. The moment you stop running from your shadow and start running toward it with open arms, everything changes. You stop being half a person trying to be perfect and become a whole person, learning to be authentic. Your shadow has been waiting your entire life for this moment. Don't keep it waiting any longer.